Hello, everyone, and welcome to the International Biochar Initiative webinar, Biochar's debut on blockchain carbon removal market. My name is Caroline Pete, and I will be facilitating this webinar. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. You should already be able to hear me and see the share screen. If you're hearing echoes or your sound quality is bad, you can use the audio functions and the GoToWebinar toolbar, which is probably on the right side of your screen. If you still have any trouble, you can send the organizers a message using the chat feature. And don't worry, we are also recording this webinar. The recording and slides will be available to you soon after the live event, most cases in just a few days. If you have a question, you can ask questions at any time using the questions pod on the GoToWebinar panel, but we will be handling all questions at the end of the presentation with both of our panelists. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to hand it off now to our moderator, Kathleen Draper, to lead you through the great presentations we have for you today. Kathleen, please take it away.
Thanks, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thanks to nearly 150 folks from over 25 countries that signed up to join us today or to listen to the recording. For the second month in a row, I believe the topic of our webinar could prove to be a real game changer for the biochar industry. This month, the focus moves from markets to money in the form of carbon removal marketplaces. As the world begins to emerge from a lengthy lockdown and face the economic calamity it caused, the voices calling for investments in a new carbon economy are growing ever stronger. Not only would this help maintain and deepen the emissions reductions we've seen over the past few months, but it is likely that it could help countries and communities to become more self-reliant and resilient. Where will the money come from after months of falling revenues for many industries and governments is a key question and concern. Carbon removal markets are a very welcome new addition to the biochar industry, and today we'll learn more about how they may be able to help provide funding for growth. Before I hand over the floor to our presenters, I always like to provide some context for any newcomers about who and what the International Biochar Initiative is all about. IBI is a membership-driven and predominantly volunteer-based organization. We've seen our membership levels grow by nearly 60% in the last 2 years, with even higher growth for our free monthly newsletter subscribers. We seek to bring together relevant stakeholders, which includes researchers, biochar entrepreneurs, biomass generators, policymakers, customers, and most recently, the investment community. We are focused on promoting good industry practices and environmental and ethical standards which support rapid scaling of biochar systems that are safe and economically viable. Through these webinars, white papers, monthly biochar bibliographies, and newsletters, we aim to keep our members up to date on the latest happenings and greatest opportunities within the industry. A few years back, IBI set what in the business world is known as a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal of helping the biochar industry to get to 1 billion tons of production per year. To understand just how ambitious that is, today we are at far less than 0.1% of that. So we have our work cut out for us, and we need all hands on deck to get there. Next slide. We are really thankful for the financial support of our growing number of sustaining business and organizational members. Since our last webinar, we've had a number of new and renewed business members join IBI, which you can see listed here. These companies come from across the globe, including Canada, Germany, Ireland, Spain, Sweden, and the United States. Next slide. I forgot my filler slide here, so just imagine there's something about IBI. Several years ago, IBI spent significant time and effort developing a methodology for carbon sequestration. Ultimately, the methodology was not accepted, and the carbon markets instead focused largely on offsets or emissions reductions, with a few exceptions for tree planting and forest preservation. However, since 2018, when the IPCC highlighted the need for significant carbon sequestration in order to materially reduce atmospheric carbon dioxide, a growing focus has emerged related to what are called negative emissions technologies, or NETs, of which there are really only a handful, and some of those have yet to become commercially available or economically viable. Biochar was recommended as one of these NETs, which is likely one of the main reasons we've seen such a huge level of interest in biochar recently. Last year, biochar made its debut on a new voluntary carbon marketplace called Puro as one of 3 initial carbon removal products. Prior to that, there had been pilots of carbon sequestration marketplaces by individual companies and even regions, such as the Kindorf region in Austria, which was our host for the 2018 biochar study tour. They've been rewarding farmers for increasing soil carbon for more than a dozen years. IBI has spoken with other organizations interested in incorporating biochar into their carbon schemes, including Vera and the Climate Action Reserve. I expect we'll see more biochar-related methodologies emerge as we move forward. But our speakers today have beta tested and are ready to launch a transparent blockchain carbon removal marketplace, which traces biochar from feedstock source to biochar production and final resting place, so to speak. Carbonfuture doesn't produce biochar or sell it, but they've created an end-to-end process which has the potential to infuse much needed capital into the biochar industry. This type of capital infusion can facilitate scaling up biochar production, which in turn will lower the cost of biochar and increase the value proposition for farmers and others interested in using biochar. Here to tell us more about this new platform are 2 of the co-founders, Hannes Junginger and Andy Woodley. Hannes, Andy, it's all yours.
Thanks, Kathleen, for the kind introduction. It's really great. I don't know what to say now because you said the goal of what we do is now clear. Yeah, help the biochar industry to grow to the 1 billion tons a year, and with that sequester an enormous amount of CO2, and this way help preventing climate change or fighting climate change. This is exactly what we want to facilitate and help to do. So let me quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Hannes Junginger. I'm a mathematician by education. Since I left university, I worked in the financial industry and as a risk manager, as a financial engineer. So I know how to create financial products, financing products, which are needed here. And I also worked as a consultant and an auditor, so also like rigorously following up on what is done and documenting stuff is what I learned. And when I learned about biochar, it really ignited my thinking, and I'm very happy that I can change professions, kind of now leave the financial industry and go help the biochar industry. Today with us also my co-founder Andreas, who is a geologist by education, and he used to be a software engineer, software architect, software manager. And now he's working with Apple, who acquired his travel app that he developed some years back, and also he is very much driven by environmental goals and objectives. So one example here, he is a co-owner of one of the first zero emission houses in Germany, which he obviously had to leave to go to the US. Next slide, please. So how did we come to biochar? It was some end of 18, beginning of 19, when I learned from Hans-Peter Schmidt and Hans-Jörg Lerchenmüller, who recently founded the European Biochar Industry Consortium, about the fascinating material, the versatility and the enormous potential of biochar as a material on the one side, but on the other side also as a means to fight climate change. And they started to discuss with me how to monetize the climate service provided, and the key aspect they highlighted was that no sink is forever. So if you grow a tree, if you grow a forest, it sequesters carbon over a certain amount of time until the tree is cut down and degrades and finally releases the carbon back into the air. So one has to distinguish different types of sinks and take this into account in the evaluation. And given that biochar has the potential to create really stable carbon sinks, it became clear from this discussion that these things are really valuable, maybe more valuable than other types of sinks which are less stable. So they asked me to help build or help create a rigorous financing instrument for this kind of things, in order to compensate for the service provided by the biochar users to the societies and to the environment, in order to help to make the material cheaper and more competitive, and help to bring it into the markets, lower the entry level costs for users. That was the starting point. And this fascinated me from a theoretical perspective and from an academic perspective, and I tried to set up a framework and think it through how it could be done. That was done in the first half of 2019. And I approached Andreas and another colleague of ours who are really experts in software and technology, to build a prototype on a blockchain basis in order to prove that it's really working. And that was the project we did last year and presented in the last year's IBI study tour in Helsinki for the first time. And the feedback was really extremely positive and encouraging. So we decided this could really help the market, the industry on the one side, and on the other side, it could be a game changer to like finance carbon sinks in a way, yes, and to help to recognize the high value of negative emission technologies as compared to standard carbon offsets and carbon offset markets. So that's what we did in last year, and then we decided to found the company and set up all the administrative legal stuff. And now we are ready. So we have a productive platform running. We did already the first pilot transactions. All went through smoothly. We can and we already financed carbon sinks based on soil applications. Next slide, please. So what is our mission? We want to be truly climate positive, so carbon negative, climate positive, and this for a long time. So we think that compensating 1 ton of CO2 emissions should be compensated by sequestering 1 ton of CO2 equivalent over at least 100 years. Why is that? So first, it must be long enough to prevent abusive speculation. So if you have a financing instrument, you could speculate on it, and it doesn't make sense to only require 20 to 30 years, because this might trigger delaying investments and give wrong incentivation. Second point, it must be in line with global climate policy. Therefore, it should be until end of century, so at least 80 years. Thirdly, it should be simple. Therefore, 80 years is a bit more difficult. We chose 100 years. That is the basic rationale for 100 years. But there is another angle to it. The kind of living sinks like forests or also soil organic carbon, they're very good things, very much needed things, but it will not be sufficient to just grow forests, because we need more stable and secure things to compensate for the destruction of very stable and secure things, namely the fossil things we are living from currently still, unfortunately. So such more stable sinks are currently more expensive than sinks with shorter durations. And accounting for that durations helps us to realize a fair price for these top quality longer duration sinks like those created by carbon preserving application of biochar. So that's why we think that biochar is an ideal starting point for a platform like ours. And so what our basis in addition to the long-term storage is, we base our carbon accounting on scientific insights. We need to have a tamper-proof, auditable, end-to-end documentation of the carbon removal chain. This is on our blockchain platform. We focus, at least in the first step, on nature-based carbon sinks. So we are absolutely open to carbon forestry-based sinks in principle, and also to soil organic carbon. Given, or having said that, we will take into account the shorter duration and the more volatile amount of carbon which is stored in these types of sinks. And what we also do and will increasingly over the next years offer is a flexible brokerage of the respective sink certificates. So next slide, please. Let's have a quick look at the carbon removal value chain we have in mind. So all that we are fostering on our platform. We start with on the left side with those who are creating the sinks. That's basically, probably most of you are working in this field. You are a biochar producer, or you are a user of biochar in agriculture, or in construction, or wherever. The needs of the sink creators and biochar producers, I think, is basically get a fair compensation, project funding for what they are doing. You want to manage the life cycle of your sinks, and obviously you also need to leverage efficient distribution channels. Then the trust on our platform for our certificates comes not from ourselves, but from independent certification bodies, which we also serve on our platform. They want to assess and monitor sinks effectively and efficiently, and of course provide full trust and verifiability. Then we have an intermediate trader or broker, which I left out here in terms of requirements. And I think it's obvious they want to they need to serve the market and make commercial activities based on trading and hedging certificates. And on the right hand side, the end clients, which we call balancers, they they want to manage their CO2 footprint. But also regulatory requirements are increasing, and they have to meet them based on auditable documentation when they do their sustainability reports. And last but not least, they need to plan and hedge their emission costs. Next slide, please. So let's have a deeper look in how the carbon sink credits we are creating together with you on our platform are composed. So it all starts with a biochar producer who produces certified biochar. Certified means safe in terms of material and application and applicability, like for example the EBC certificate certifies. So this biochar is sold to someone who applies it. That's the top horizontal arrow. And when the biochar is produced, before it is applied in a carbon preserving way, a lot of stuff can happen with it. You can apply it in soil, then it's stable, but you could also do other things like using it in steel production, where it kind of makes sense and replaces fossil coal, for example. But then it's not a sink. So it really matters what you are doing with the product, and this is documented on the on our platform via a document which has to be signed by the biochar user. We call it Carbonfuture coupon. You can download it on our website, and this is also documented on our platform together with a production certificate. We come to the two types of documents in more detail in the following slides. So when a certified biochar production and an eligible application come together, are matched, only then a carbon sink credit is created. And what we do on the platform is we match that, we combine it unalterably and create the sink certificates. We also combine them into portfolios in order to provide larger amounts of carbon, or to diversify the type of carbon sinks and sell these shares of these portfolios to balancers. So next slide, please. So you might be interested how the money flows. So obviously on the last slide we saw how the certificate is created from the biochar producer and the user, who is the sink creator, and sold to the balancer, and the money flows into in the opposite direction, obviously. So we sell to the carbon sink credits to a balancer, take a share of the money, and we compensate the sink creator, who is the user, and this is what Carbonfuture pays, right? And so in this way we inject money into the value chain of biochar. The biochar producer himself is not compensated directly, typically by Carbonfuture, unless the biochar producer is also the user and the sink creator. Then obviously he's compensated by Carbonfuture. But if that's not the case, if sink creator, i.e. user, and producer are different persons, then the biochar producer is compensated indirectly by being able to sell the biochar at a higher price, because it has the potential to create a sink. So if the producer has a production certificate on his material, he can sell the biochar obviously at a higher price, because the user can get compensation from Carbonfuture. Our price target is between 50 and 100 dollar or euro or Swiss franc or whatever per ton of CO2 equivalent for a sequestration over 100 years. That is informed by the prices in existing carbon markets and the top end of the price range, because we are convinced that these sinks we provide here are of absolutely top quality. And it also relates to CO2 taxes, which are paid in Sweden or Switzerland, for example. So that is what I wanted to say on the cash flow. So next slide, please. In terms of onboarding requirements, we saw it in the schema, in the picture with the arrows. You need basically the most important onboarding hurdle is getting a production certificate, which assesses the carbon footprint or the net carbon sink potential of your produced biochar. In this, there's the carbon footprint of the feedstock. there is the emissions deducted in the pyrolysis process, and there is the so this is relating to both the energy consumption in the pyrolysis process and potential methane emissions. Currently eligible is the EBC Sync certificate. The standards have been published some weeks or days ago on the website of the European Biochar certificate, and the EBC Sync certificate requires EBC or IBI certified biochar. So that's the one onboarding requirement, and the other element is that you need to use your biochar in a carbon preserving way, which is documented on the Carbonfuture coupon, which is signed by the user. It validates the individual carbon preserving biochar application. So for example, a direct soil application or compost or animal feed, and it's there to waive the commercial rights of the carbon sink, because that's in the end the value which is traded. All that is, as said, linked via our blockchain, and therefore providing the needed transparency to make it fully auditable. So that's what I wanted to say, and for more detail, I want to hand over to Andreas, please.
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Andreas. Thank you, Hannes, for the great introduction. We're really happy to have the opportunity today to talk to all of you. So thanks for joining. Thanks for your interest. I hope what Hannes presented to you was interesting, makes sense to you. In the following slides, I want to go into some more details. So let's start with the certification process Hannes already was talking about. Certification is certainly key to our platform. With certification, we ensure that we are truly creating carbon sinks. It's all verifiable and holds true to scientific standards. So what's our approach to that? The key thing to understand here is, and Hannes briefly mentioned it before, we are not our own certification body. We don't basically define our own rules. All we can do is, from our side, define minimum requirements for our platform, what we think makes sense. So these so-called Carbonfuture minimum requirements, they do exactly that. And the minimum requirements we put forward are relatively straightforward. So we want to rely on a standardized process that's based on a scientific method. We want any certification we accept to help us clearly define a sink and ultimately be able to produce a sequestration curve. So we really want to know what is the net carbon that's being sequestered, and also what is the behavior over time. Another requirement of our minimum standard is we certainly want to avoid any non-beneficial side effects. So we require that the application of biochar or whatever carbon preserving methodology we accept, there's no significant side harm. So you can't just produce biochar from clear cutting a wood, for example. The minimum requirements, they are also open for piloting and innovation. We are very well aware that what we're doing is basically at the forefront of establishing new methodologies and new markets and new practices. So we certainly want to be able to also support that and not to be just restrictive with our requirements. So there is also an option to do innovative pilots in in a sense that they are restricted in terms of scalability, etc. And the sole purpose is to explore things and not just create a loophole for any type of non-solid verifiable certification. So these are the Carbonfuture minimum requirements. They're kind of the guiding principles for our platforms. And with these minimum requirements, we certainly talk to certification bodies like EBC or IBI, and which are the institutions that ultimately event these certificates we rely on. And certainly there's open communications between us and these bodies. It's not a one-way direction. Whatever new developments there are in the scientific community, we're eager to learn it. Our goal is to do the right thing and to produce true carbon sinks. That for sure. So just a couple more comments on the production certificate. Hannes already mentioned. It's to be clear about the production certificate. It's actually a two-part certificate. So there is a sink certificate component and a biochar certificate component. They depend on each other, and they're both important. The biochar certificate, which is the EBC or the IBI certificate, pretty much ensure that the input material is of good quality. We determine the carbon content of the material. It's pretty much analyzing the material and the feedstock, which is certainly the foundation. The EBC zinc certificate, which is the current, the only zinc certificate we have at the moment. On top of that, ensures that we truly account for the zinc value or the carbon zinc potential of the produced biochar, and that means, you've seen it in the slide before, we need to discount energy that's been used to produce the biochar, or emissions that have been produced. So this is really important to determine the net potential of the zinc. And just to give an example, what that practically means, the biochar certificate could verify that you have a roughly 90% carbon content, and then as part of the zinc evaluation, that basically is being reduced due to all the deductions, and you might end up with just 85% or 80% true carbon zinc potential. Next slide, please. Now that you basically have an overview of the basic workflow, I will want to talk about eligible applications. So we've been talking about soil application so far, but this is certainly where we're coming from. This is a process we already established, and we're ready to fully scale out. But we obviously also have other applications in mind we want to support on our platform. Biochar is very versatile, has really great characteristics that makes it a prime candidate for other applications as well. So let me quickly go through some of the application types we are envisioning for our platform. As I said, soil application, this is where we started. Soil application, actually, to be clear, not just means direct application to the soil. So the example I put here is compost additive. The idea behind that is that anything that eventually, or not eventually, finally ends up in soil and hence can be accounted for as being preserved over the period of time we envision for our platform, that's what we consider a soil application. So, but to be less restrictive about the requirements, it already, if you create compost that has biochar in it, we consider that as establishing a thing. No sane person would actually take compost that is enriched with biochar and actually start pulling out the biochar and trying to whatever burn it or use it in other applications. So we really wanna be rigorous on one side, but on the other side we want to also be practical in how we approach the certification and value chain. So compost additive is a perfect example for soil application. If you produce compost with biochar additives, you are eligible for our platform. The permanence assessment we're doing here is based on scientific studies. So we need to know what is the degradation rate of biochar within the soil. And certainly here we're taking a defensive value, so we can be sure that there is at least the carbon we verify on our certificates is truly preserved in the ground. There might be eventually more, but we want to be on the defensive side here. So as we said, this is already EB-Sync supported, and we already had the first pilot transactions on our platform. We're ready to go for this type of application. The two other types of applications we are envisioning is durable biochar to be used in durable construction material, and it's important here to emphasize. We're talking about durable construction material. Certainly, there are other types of construction material that are not as durable, and where it becomes harder to monitor. We will potentially tackle that in the future, but to keep things simple and safe, durable construction material is a good starting point. Concrete and biochar as an additive to concrete is a very interesting approach here. In terms of permanence assessment, from our current knowledge, there's no permanence assessment required. It is certainly for the period of 100 years perfectly captured within concrete. So the need for a sequestration curve is not really required here. The EB-Sync already supports that, which is great, and we are open for our platform to start pilots on that. So if you are working in that area and you want to reach out to us, please do so. Really want to learn more about that area and see how we can start bootstrapping that. Last but not least, other materials. There are interesting discussions around applying biochar to asphalt or to plastic. These applications are certainly more challenging, especially with respect to the permanence assessment, and in our opinion, clearly need some type of monitoring, which makes it more costly, more complicated. But these are things we want to certainly also explore and develop. Next slide, please. So we have a truly international audience here, which is really, really great. And certainly with our platform, we wanna support as many markets as possible. What you've heard so far is that we started off with EBC certificates. So certainly we are focused on the European market for now, but we're already trying to establish a similar process for North America, and actually we already did so in the combination of EBC and IBI certificates. So in terms of market coverage, countries we're supporting, the EU is fully supported, North America is fully supported thanks to the collaboration of EBC and IBI. For the rest of the world, for now, this has to be done on a case-by-case study, and in general, we would route you through the EBC here. But at least we have a path for. We should have a path for everyone interested. Next slide, please. I want to quickly talk about balances. So who are the end consumers of our credits? What are we envisioning here, or what are already our partners? There are 3 types of balances we are currently observing. There is certainly the industry, corporates, or institutional bodies. They are straightforward buyers of carbon sink credits, and it's important for us that we for that segment we focus on green businesses or institutions or corporates that are really interested in greening off their specific activities and businesses. We certainly don't want to greenwash any businesses or industries. That's important, but kind of facilitate the transition to a greener economy and basically help accomplishing that and helping offset excess emissions from our side. This is pretty much B2B type of business channel, and yeah, relatively straightforward. The second type of balances we're talking about is sink creators themselves, and we learned that this is actually a relatively large market. So these sink creators, they are in a situation where they can create things themselves, but they also want to use the credits themselves. They don't want to potentially sell it on an open market, but use it for other parts of their business to compensate or to balance. And for these type of customers, we want to support the documentation and also pretty much offer our platform as a service for that. Last but not least, every individual should be able to balance their offsets or balance their emissions on our platform, and this is actually something we're planning to release later this year. We're working on that part. Yeah, so this should give you an overview of balances. If you're interested in any of that, please reach out to us. Certainly, we're very happy to talk to you. Next slide, please. I want to finish off my part with giving you a glimpse into the platform, what we're doing there, and also using that as a way to recap some of the aspects of what we're doing. So next slide, please. The key element of our platform is certainly the technology, and you've seen it in the title of this webinar. Blockchain is a key technology to enable tamper-proof supply chain management, tamper-proof documentation of all the assets we have on our platform. And I don't know how familiar you are with blockchain. There's a large spectrum of technologies you can use, and blockchain technology itself is actually not uncritical. If you look at the energy consumption of Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's quite stunning, and certainly basing our platform on one of these so-called proof of work platforms would be kind of counterintuitive to the idea or goal we're trying to accomplish. So The good thing is there's an alternative to that, so-called permissioned blockchain. I don't want to go into all the details of that, but just want to basically give you a high-level understanding of that we're taking this really serious. So we want to accomplish both being a sustainable business, but also really leverage the core aspects of blockchain to achieve that type of transparency that's really needed for that type of application. So there is Hyperledger Fabric from IBM. This is one of these very much established so-called permissions blockchains. This is not based on proof of work, but proof of stake. It also has the key advantage of clearly being able to establish confidential transactions. So, for example, there's always a balance between transparency and privacy. For example, you might be familiar with GDPR rulings in Europe. So we must not store personal information in the blockchain. We can store that on our servers, but actually in the blockchain, we can store company informations and all the sync informations, etc., etc. But this is one of the challenges we actually have been able to nicely resolve on our platform. Just to give you a glimpse of what is the underlying technology, and we successfully managed. Next slide, please. So if you log into our platform, there are a couple of roles we're supporting, and they're all listed here in the super user view. Hannes pretty much explained all of them so far. It starts with the sync producer, someone who uploads their production certificate to the platform. The sync registrar is pretty much the sync registrator or sync creator that establishes the sync on our platform. Once we have all these documents contributed from these two external parties, the Carbonfuture certifier is taking that information and establishes the carbon credits, basically adding a verification step on top of it. And then, as we talked about, there's the broker and the balancer. Next slide, please. So there's certainly, with all these roles, there's lots of functionality on the platform to support each individual role. So what I just want to highlight here is for the person who's registering the think. This is what they basically establish. They upload, or they have the Carbonfuture coupon available, which you've seen before, which testifies the application of the biochar. We have all the relevant information about the application, the sync type, the core measurements. We also take into account on our platform the means of transportation, so we don't stop with the produced biochar and the sync potential, but we also deduct potential shipment of the material, and we link it to the production certificate. It's all coming together here on our platform. We geolocate the sync, and ultimately we vend the CF certificate, which is the climate credit the broker can then sell to the balancer. Please pay attention to the sequestration curve here. We've been mentioning that before. So we're really, this is key to our platform, as Hannes said. We really want to truly measure the carbon content that's been sequestered over time. And with every sink over time, you're losing carbon, and we don't want to sell any carbon that's in 100 years time that's no longer preserved then. So certainly there's some degradation in the content of the carbon sink, as you can see in this chart here. What we and what we are selling from this from the sequestration potential of a sink is truly these rectangular regions, which basically ensure you that you are sequestering, for example, 10 tons of CO2 equivalent over 100 years. Yeah, next slide, please. Very quickly, here a screenshot of our Carbonfuture coupon. We want to make it very simple for the entity that's supplying the biochar and actually establishes a thing to basically testify it to us by filling out this coupon, by defining the type of application, and certainly with that coupon waiving the commercial rights for the carbon sink aspect of the biochar application. Next slide, please. And last but not least, we talked about portfolios or brokerage as part of our platform. This is just a demo screenshot of a demo portfolio, but I think it is important for us to be as flexible as possible for the market, and for various reasons. I think end customers, they are either interested in offsetting bulk amounts of carbon emissions, so they're certainly interested in very specific type of portfolios that could take care, that have the respective capacity to offset huge amounts, but there could also be end users who are really very much interested in specific applications. So they are interested that, for example, biochar gets applied to local farmers and helps the local farming, and also has the side benefit of soil enrichment, etc., etc. So I think the bottom line here is we want to serve all these customers, and that's the reason why we have this portfolio concept. You can nicely compile a portfolio with specific characteristics, descriptions, and the end user will actually be able to see that and basically, like different types of sequestration products, choose from each of them. And certainly these portfolios themselves are being established by individual CF certificates. So we clearly document what are the underlying sources and sinks for these portfolios. So there is transparency, and we're not selling you something high level that is not traceable to the actual sink application. Next slide, please. And that's where I hand over to Hannes.
Yeah, thanks, Andreas. Great stuff. Yeah, let me just wrap up and point out that we are ready for business. So the platform is running. The EBC Sync certificate is available. The first certificates are issued currently by the Ithaca Institute. So in case our suggestion is, in case if you already have IBI or EBC certified biochar production, or you are a user of IBI or EBC certified biochar, we would be very happy to get in contact with you and do the first pilot transactions, try out what we can do together. In particular, soil applications, we know how it works now. Also in terms of further applications in in the construction material area, it would be great to do the first pilots. But also on the for the other roles, I mean, we are not only interested in trading certificates, but our major goal, as said in the beginning, is to really serve the industry and be and establish a platform and to establish a platform economy. So it's not only us doing business on the platform, but also balancers, other brokers we can cooperate with in order to provide the growth that is needed on the one side to work on the vision for biochar, Kathleen outlined in the beginning, and on the other side to help fight climate change. So also, if you're interested in cooperation in that space, please reach out to us. Thanks. I want to close with that, and on next slide you have our oh, it's not our the link to our website, but anyway, Q&A.
Sorry about that, Hannes. We'll make sure it's included in the email that goes out to everybody.
Yeah.
But first of all, I want to thank you guys for all the hard work that went into developing this new platform and for really trying to understand all the nuances of biochar's net sequestration capabilities. I know it's often a long road to figure that out. And I'm also really grateful that you guys reached out to collaborate with the IBI over the past few months. I suspect you're going to have a lot of interest moving forward in the Carbonfuture platform. We do already have a ton of questions, but I thought it might be worth having one of the people that's listening talk for just a couple of minutes about his experience as he's a biochar broker, Josiah Hunt. Many of you in the U.S. know Josiah. He's been in the business for a decade, working mostly out in California and Hawaii as well. So Caroline, if you could try to connect Josiah Hunt.
I believe he's connected.
Oh, okay. Maybe we could get his perspective on what it's been like being the beta tester in the U.S. So Josiah, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, would you mind giving us a quick couple minutes?
Yeah, gosh, what a hard act to follow. Andreas and Hans, what a great presentation. Very thorough, you covered it all. That was, I texted Kathleen partway through that this is one of the most exciting webinars I've seen hosted here. And you guys did a great job explaining the details of what's going on. I have been in the business of producing and distributing and researching and using biochar for going on 12 years now. And the whole thing started, I believe, it's impossible to separate the climate change mitigation goals that are part of this biochar story from the activity, from the growth of the industry. I think from the very beginning, that's been a part of what we're trying to do here. Not just make a bunch of biochar and improve the soils, but it's a bigger picture, this climate change mitigation, this ecosystem services and benefits, part of it that has, I think, been a driving factor in the growth and inspiring so many of us to be here today. And as of yet, it has been nearly impossible to turn that into a financial gain. It's something that helps me sleep good at night, but of the thousands and thousands of tons of biochar put in the ground, I haven't gotten paid a dime for any of it. It helps with people coming on and seeing, hey, I'm interested in your product, partly because I want to be a part of this as well. But you guys have done something which is, I believe, profound in helping create a platform for some of this do-good type of energy to actually turn into dollars, to turn into finance, and to actually help with that end of the business, which is really important because you know, many of us in the biochar industry could grow a lot faster if we were not as financially constrained. And so what you've put together is just I'm just really excited to be a part of it, and not just because of the concept of being able to turn these carbon credits into a financial reward that can help propel this forward, but also because of the rigor that you have put into this platform. You have put in such rigor into the details of the platform, and I like how you incorporated the blockchain, not just that you used it, but how you incorporated that in there. Looks very well, and the result appears to be a very rigorous, but also very functional platform that looks like it has really a good amount of room to grow. When we first started inventing, you know, I mean, I didn't invent a bank, but I mean, imagining the first banks, gosh, you don't build it right, there's not much room to grow. And I think you guys built something right here, and I'm really excited to take a part of it. That's plenty enough time. I think we should leave it to the millions of questions, I'm sure, that are, or maybe not millions, but the many questions that are out there waiting. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Jose, I appreciate it. And I can already tell we're not going to have enough time to get to all of the questions. So I will ask Hannes and Andy if we could maybe send you some of the questions, and then we can send it back out to everyone in a week or so, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfectly fine with.
So let me try to dive in here to some of the ones that I think are very critical. They're all critical, but one, and I know we've talked about this, is there a kind of minimum size, either on the production size or on the sink size, that makes it feasible? How do you plan to interact with micro sinks such as customers' garden soil bags with 10% biochar content and that type of thing?
So I take that one. So that's a tricky one, because we really appreciate all the efforts that are being done by smallholder farmers, by people who are doing great projects in emerging countries. Having said that, I really we need to start with a more industrialized projects, just to get things up and running, and start from there and get more granular over the course of time. So for this year, we are really focusing on I mean, having the IBI certificate or the EBC certificate is already a kind of a certain entry hurdle, and if you have that, then we could start already now. For the future, we are working together with, also discussions have started with the IBI how to acknowledge the work that is done in smaller scale applications. So if I'm forced to say a number, I would say production, some lower 100 tons of biochar a year would be a starting point for now. But we really want to enlarge over time. Is that fair answer?
Yep. Okay, so the IBI draft protocol was criticized because of the stability criterion it proposed, which related to the HD ratio being 0.7 or lower. What's the criterion you will use, and what is the scientific basis, given the controversies over this in the past?
So it's 0.4, if I'm not mistaken. It's depending on the EBC sink definitions. We are currently the biochar we are currently considering has lower than 0.4, and the respective degradation rate is a more conservative one out of the few, or like not few, but out of the studies available, and we take into account 0.3% degradation per annum. So that means, in the way, you have to deduct 15% of your carbon content over 100 years, approximately.
Okay. There are a few questions about when you see this expanding to different parts of the world, including South Africa, Central America, other parts of Asia?
We are working on that on a case-by-case basis. So we are already in discussions with projects outside of Europe and North America. But also with that, we are doing in 2020. We are doing that on individual cases, and to roll it out in a more standardized manner. That's something we can be more, or we will be more concrete about in 2021. And that would probably also go through regional bodies. I mean, I guess currently, but it's not established yet.
Okay. There was a question as to whether you could expand on what you meant by the waiver of commercial rights.
And that means you can't sell something and claim it yourself. So if you sell your sink and get compensated for that, you must not use the same. The physical sink stays with you, right? If you're a farmer and you apply biochar in your compost, then the carbon is in your compost. Basically, you could go to your national authorities. Maybe you have a carbon tax in your country, and then say, hey, I sequestered some carbon. Please deduct it from my carbon tax, and or you apply for a state subsidy for a soil improvement program, and soil improvement and carbon sequestration program. And if you do that, you can't at the same time sell the same service to via the platform. That's not possible. But then, of course, the good soil stays with you, and you can make marketing with that you did good and so on. You just must not claim it in a state subsidy or such a program.
So just to recap that or add to that, so it's definitely the legal foundation for us to sell the credits. So we need that type of waiver. And as Hannes said, it really prevents double counting of the thing. These are the two main reasons why we require that Carbonfuture coupon, and that's the only reason why we have it. And as Hannes said, you can certainly advertise it or your activity, but it's the true sink value you're creating. That one is waived to Carbonfuture for the two reasons I just mentioned.
Right, but I will say that it doesn't preclude that sink from being accounted for in the nationally determined contributions. There's no value in that, but if countries want to include biochar as part of their goals to achieving the Paris Agreement reductions, they can still do that, right?
Yeah, that's a challenge taken. That's a difficult discussion. I would say, I mean, you can't account a sink twice. That's not possible. I mean, if countries would do that, we have to have a serious discussion. It's just not. I mean, we have the ambition to effectively fight climate change, right? We have to do that as humankind, and then we also have to, in order to realize that, we have to account honestly, and we can't account for a sink twice. So we need a really serious discussion about sinks which are included in the NDCs. Not saying that it's not possible, but double counting must be avoided.
Agreed, right. Okay, so could you talk a little bit more about the split in revenue from the participating partners, that is the producers, the broker, the ones that are sinking the carbon? How do you see that revenue being shared?
Okay, so I mean, to start with, I want to highlight that we only have experience from some pilot transactions, and what our guiding principle was to price these transactions was that there are three participants to create a sink. One is the one who produces the biochar. The other one, the next one, the most important one, is the user of the biochar, and then it is us who document all that stuff and bring it together and make it auditable. So let's start with a split of 1/3. So each one of these parties gets the same share. So that's was the guiding principle for the start. However, in future, we see obviously as volume increases, our share decreasing. So that's a high margin for a transaction service provider, which is not justified for when there's significant volume. So but in concrete terms, if a sink realizes, for example, $50, we would pay the sink creator $33, for example, if that's the case with a 1/3 split, and take ourselves 16, so or 17, so that it ends up with 50. However, okay, so that's the split there, and based on the fact that the biochar, the produced biochar has the sink potential, we see that the sink producer can sell the biochar at an increased price. So this $33 in this example would allow to increase the price by, let's say, 20 or something. Or 10 for the producer. So it's a split between these parties, with a margin of ours starting at 30% going down.
Great, thanks. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because I think they're related. The first question was, can you talk about the differences between Carbonfuture and platforms such as Nori and Puro? And the related question is, why not offer the option to the producer of capturing the credit? It's often easier to sell a lower price product than a higher price product with a rebate. And I think that is one of the differences between Carbonfuture and Puro.
Yeah, let me.
Go ahead.
So you want to answer that? Go ahead.
Okay, I take it. So when the biochar is produced, a lot of things can happen with the biochar. That's one of the great aspects of biochar, that you can do a lot of good things with biochar. Not every application eventually is a carbon preserving one, and sinks are only established if you apply it in a carbon preserving way. That so the sink characteristic, is it durable, is it not durable, that has to be accounted, because that actually established the value of the sink. So that's why we build a framework like that. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, maybe to add to that. So as you said, it's really important to not just stop at the production of biochar, but really we need to follow through on that. What the truly sequestered and truly preserved carbon. I think that's a differentiator between us and other platforms. I think so. If we compare ourselves to Nori and Puro, we all have slightly different characteristics. Nori certainly is currently focusing on direct soil enrichment through farming, so they're not supporting biochar. Certainly they have and that methodology is great, but certainly for us, with the requirement of permanence, we see that's something we can currently only establish with biochar. And maybe I don't want to at this point, like yeah, all these platforms are great. So we don't see each other as true competitors. We're all working towards the same cause, but just so in the sense of highlighting some differences. So with Nori, it's certainly the type of sequestration that's a differentiator. Also the type of financially how things are working. They are more technically oriented towards blockchain, and they're actually selling coins, sequestration coins. So that's another differentiator. With Puro, they're certainly more familiar with what we're doing. In terms of conceptual approach, they are not capturing the true sequestration aspect of biochar. Just to highlight that and basically put things into perspective.
Great, thanks.
Maybe one quick remark. I mean, also what is very important for us is that we are a platform. So we want to establish a platform economy and be also provide a framework for growth, and not only provide the specific market for the credits. Just a side remark.
I agree. Yeah, and I actually had a side conversation just now with Adam O'Toole from Norway about maybe this is the kind of platform that countries could use to calculate the biochar contribution portion of their nationally determined contribution, which is an interesting idea. A couple of nuanced questions here. Are you able, when you're calculating the total emissions, to differentiate, say, between transportation done by diesel trucks and EV trucks, and is that level of detail something you're capable of differentiating?
Yeah, we are, but to be honest, we are doing that currently manually. So we are doing that. We are taking it into account. Current transportation means we have already on the platform are all based on diesel trucks, and this is done manually. The calculation currently.
Okay.
But we do
and someone was asking if you've vetted the price that you quoted, 50 to 100 euros or dollars. Do you have any market analysis on that as of yet?
Yes and no, I would say. There are, I mean, prices are really, there are all types of prices currently in the market. It goes from very permanent things in the direct air capture space, which go up to $1,000. And on the other side, there are forestation projects which are in the space of $3. We think that we can be able to, we are able to realize that prices in terms of volume at which we can sell in these prices. That has the experience has to be made. So that's the market has to be explored.
Okay. A question on who does the life cycle assessment to estimate the carbon footprint of biochar produced by a sink producer or sink creator?
Okay, so that's a part of the EBC. So the producer side is part of the EBC sink certificate, and the sink creator side is on us.
And as part of to add to that, as part of the EBC sink certification, the feedstock life cycle assessment is considered, so that as part of that certification process, you need to document where does your feedstock come from, and so that's where we account for that.
Okay. A question on whether you consider the carbon footprint of the energy used by the blockchain program itself.
Yeah, I can talk to that. That's a good question. That's exactly why we followed that very specific technology choice. We're not leveraging any of these public popular blockchains, which are, to be honest, mainly used for financial instruments or gaming. So the permission blockchain runs on a dedicated network of servers, which is, and the transactions themselves are very efficient. So there is no, the energy consumption is not significantly different than operating a regular IT infrastructure where you just have a standardized database or something like that. So the we certainly the accounting for that is something we will do as part of running our business. Once we scale it out, right now it's the service we're running on is really, they're really very energy efficient, and the offset we need to do for that is minimal. But actually the offset of the infrastructure is something we will do as part of our company. But to reassure, it's not different to any other IT infrastructure. So all the negative news you hear about energy consumption for these regular public blockchains, that doesn't apply to us.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still scrolling through these. I think we may have answered this, but I'm going to ask it. How can this private market interact with public carbon incentive schemes? There may arise double counting where, for example, the Norwegian government accounts for a carbon sink in its territory, and where also Carbonfuture sells the sink to a foreign customer.
Yeah, I mean, that is an issue, and we approach it currently, starting in Europe, discussing with for example, with people working for the German government in exactly this space. This is, I mean, we have, as your Norwegian colleague, as you mentioned before, we could in principle do the accounting for this type of things for the government. That would be a way, but I mean, it's not on us to decide that. We are starting these discussions. We are trying to educate the policymakers, and that's a starting point. And what all we can do, we are doing, and we there are two options I currently see. Either we are very open, we disclose everything, but in case the state would kind of steal the things and do double counting of things which are already sold, we could potentially just only publish these credits privately, so the state wouldn't even know that this the respective sink was established. So, but I mean, this is just like that's a part of a academic and theoretical framework research we are currently doing and discussing with policymakers. The solution is not yet there. And by the way, if you start discussing with states and you are discussing about the sizes we can provide with the current biochar production, you wouldn't come to the respective. I mean, they wouldn't take it into account. It's too little. So we first need to grow and prove that that we can do this. And it's not only Carbonfuture that needs to grow, but first and foremost the biochar industry. And
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a tricky question. How many tons of biochar equals 1 ton of CO2 equivalent? But I know there's not a fixed answer.
So, but it's a good one. So take your ton of biochar, take away, so suppose it's dry mass, yeah? So the water can't be accounted for. Then you deduct the non-carbon elements. Then you have the carbon part of biochar. Then you deduct, as Andy said, the emissions and the energy consumption of the pyrolysis process. And then you might end up probably with 80% of the dry mass biochar, probably. And so it really depends on the quality of the material. Maybe it's 75 and or 70 or something like that. I don't know. and then you need to deduct if you apply it in soil. We account for 100 years. We apply 0.3% per annum degradation rate. So it's again 15% deduction of that. And the transportation and processing losses or emissions, energy use is typically not so much in relative terms. So it could be a fair assumption that you end up with a factor of 2.5 or 2.5 for dry mass. 1 ton of dry mass biochar, 2.5. That's my suggestion. Or it depends. Maybe it's 2.2 or 2.65 or so, but that's what we experienced yet. Yeah.
Okay. A question on whether there is a linkage to sorry, I lost my question here, to biodiversity monitoring. As I can imagine, utilizing biochar in soil for remediation and restoration would also lead to an increase in biodiversity, and we now see there is a great deal of interest in biodiversity monitoring and validation. Is there any way to track this and add it to the value of the carbon credit?
Let me answer that. I think I was pointing in that direction with our idea behind the portfolio. So when we put together, or a broker on our platform puts together a portfolio, they can clearly highlight these aspects. The key thing we're certainly selling is the sequestration of carbon over time. But as part of the portfolio, you can highlight all the other side benefits and specifically advertise for that, and even set a higher price point. So it's basically indirectly by the vehicle of our portfolios, you can bring in these other criteria of your application. But it's hard for us in terms of like truly quantifying that. We don't have and to be honest, I don't know if there are any certificates in that place or any other assessments that could be leveraged. So we kind of defer that to the broker and the entity that's selling these very specific types of applications. But as I said, it can be priced in, it can be presented as such, and that's the nice thing about having these portfolios.
Yeah, I will say last week when Hannes and Andy were speaking to the IBI board about this, one of the IBI board members said this is a very conservative way of accounting for the carbon impact. But one of the differentiators here between some existing carbon markets is that they really want to decouple reduction in carbon emissions, which you may get from creating renewable energy through the biochar production process, and the carbon sink. So it is feasible in some countries or with other types of carbon markets that they could have these synergistic carbon financing scenarios where they also get revenue related to reductions. Say, for example, you're putting it in a manure slurry and you're reducing the methane emissions. If there is a methodology that accounts for that, there's no reason a farmer couldn't get paid for that. But that has nothing to do with the sequestration aspect of this. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're pretty close to finishing most of these. I will send you these just so we've covered them all, but with that, we're coming up to our deadline. So I want to thank you again for putting the time in to get this presentation together. I wish you luck. I think you're going to have a lot of people knocking on your door. Yeah, so next slide, please. Last month I had produced a few other upcoming webinars, but in reality, I had to make a few changes to the timing of that because of my own availability is going to be limited over the summer. As I was telling Hannes and Andy, I'm about to start constructing my own desync sanctuary. I'm building a house out of straw and biochar, and that's going to be taking a lot of my time over the summer. But we are having a, whoops, this is not correct. I'm sorry. We are having a webinar on July 21st, but it is not going to be the Investors Forum. That's been moved to the fall. We will be hosting one which should appeal to all chocolate lovers. My fellow board member, Brenton Ladd, will be talking about how they've been able to reduce cadmium uptake in cacao plants using biochar. And this not only makes the chocolate healthier, but it has saved Peruvian farmers from losing out on the European marketplace after stricter regulations were rolled out last year. Next slide. For any non-members that joined us today, we would love to have you become IDI members, and to encourage that, we have this special offer, which is good through the end of the month, which you can see here. You should receive a survey shortly related to today's webinar. If you fill that out, it helps us to continue to improve this webinar series and to plan for future topics. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today and for your continued support of IDI. Stay safe, and we hope to have you join us again in the future.